Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in Season 2 Part 7 of What If the Transformers Crash Landed in Code Geass. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. The origins of Geass. Grimlock stood alone looking at the endless blue sea, standing near the edge of the artificial island that was Horai Island. The second he came to the base, Ratchet performed a scan on him to see the extent of Shockwave's own experimentations, but a scan was as far as he would allow it to go, maybe just an energon sample at the most, but that was it. He would never go into another laboratory unless absolutely necessary. He also took the time to learn about these Black Knights the Autobots aligned themselves with, and the history of this planet. So far, he was far from impressed. The human race, as far as he knew, were literally soft and squishy, easily crushed underfoot. The nightmares they used to fight, nothing more than cheap toys that even he could rip apart if he wanted to. Though there are a few that he would consider somewhat impressive, but most of them not present on the island as they and their pilots are with the human leader Zero on another mission. He knew Optimus had a soft spot for weaklings, not that Grimlock despised weak creatures, but he felt their place was not on the battlefield. And it wasn't just humanity's physical weakness, it was its seeming incapability of overlooking even the tiniest differences and their persecution of them. If he had been around when this Britannia was still in power, he would have marched straight onto their capital and utterly demolished it for their zealous and self-righteous attitudes as well as their war crimes which weren't too different from the Decepticons. He'll let Optimus and this Zero sort out the politics, that was never his strong suit. His priority would be to demolish every Decepticon in his path, as well as locate his team. Oh my. He turned around to see a trio of humans approaching him. So you're the one they call Grimlock? Lloyd observed with an intrigued smile. What do you want? Grimlock questioned. Pardon us for interrupting whatever you were doing, Grimlock. Cecile smiled apologetically. We were just. All the Cybertronians we've seen so far have the ability to transform into vehicles or other forms of machinery, yet you can transform into an Earth dinosaur. Rakshata said. Why is that? She asked with her own intrigued expression. Grimlock looked rather annoyed but chose to give an answer anyway. Apparently Shockwave somehow discovered the species that roamed on this planet before you humans and modeled my transformation after it. I've heard you lead your own team. Lloyd said. Are they all Dinobots like you? Yes. Grimlock confirmed. Can we see this marvelous transformation of yours? Lloyd asked. No. Why not? I'm rather curious myself. Rakshata queried. Because I can't. Grimlock revealed. Best to get this out of the way and hopefully get some peace and quiet. Apparently I can only transform when I'm angered enough. Don't know why, that's just how it works for me now, thanks to Shockwave. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Cecile said. She could tell from his tone of voice that it was a painful ordeal to say the least. Maybe I could take a peek inside. Lloyd offered. See if we can do anything about. Grimlock leaned in close to the trio of scientists, particularly Lloyd. One look into his glowing red optics was enough for him to gulp as the large Dinobot spoke in a strict and warning tone. The last one who took a peek inside me had his arm ripped off. So, unless you want to get crushed into a squishy red pulp, take your curiosity elsewhere. Got it? Why, yes sir. Lloyd backed away, with even Rakshata looking nervous while Cecile was almost terrified. The three of them quickly turned around and left the area, leaving Grimlock alone with his thoughts again. The Ark, Bridge. A political marriage? Optimus questioned as he, Ironhide, and Ratchet stood alongside Cornelia, Fixit, Toto, Ogie, Guilford, Nonette, and Tamaki, having received the report from Wizard as well as Diethard. Yes, it was recently announced that a political marriage were to take place between the former Britannian Prince Schneisel and the Chinese Federation Empress Tianzi. Diethard revealed. Damn, your brother was backstabber, now he's a pedophile. Tamaki questioned to Cornelia. The girl's like what, 10 years old? She's actually 13, and no. Schneisel is scum but he's not a pedophile. The former Britannian princess commented. Human depravity aside, this is a significant development for our enemies. Ratchet said. And should it succeed? It'll be a major problem for us. Ogie finished. The Decepticons could gain total control over the Chinese Federation like that. He snapped his fingers for emphasis. That definitely sounds like something Schneisel would do. Nonet said. They'd gain an entire superpowers army, and at least 1 million human slaves without spilling a single drop of blood. Shink told us the high eunuchs were greedy and immoral, but selling a child to the Khans just to save their own sorry hides. It's no wonder Starscream could hold a decent conversation with them, they're just like him. Ironhide stated. Then let's just go in and bust the kid out of there. Tamaki suggested. We got a couple agents on the inside, don't we? We can't contact any of them because of the Prime Dragon protocol in place. Wizard reminded Tamaki. And the wedding isn't right away, it's in a few days. I agree, we can't afford to go in guns blazing. Toto said. We run the risk of endangering the Empress as well as our own if we do that. And if young Tianzi were to perish, the Decepticons and the High Eunuchs could easily persuade the Chinese populace into thinking that we were the ones responsible, Optimus said. They'd make her a martyr, and still gain the entire Chinese Federation on their side. Guilford noted with unease and disgust in his voice. Using a child like that was dishonorable and cowardly. Why can't just use a ground bridge to bail them out? Tamaki asked. We can't. Fix-It answered as TAI appeared to bring up a hologram of the Vermilion Forbidden City. There is some sort of barrier around Palace that emits a frequency that makes ground bridges impossible. This barrier seems to be projected from a device within the palace. TAI added. The interference prevents us from locating it, but if it is connected to an ample power source, there is a possibility the barrier could be expanded well beyond the palace. So even if we were to sneak in, we don't know the limits of this anti-ground bridge technology, which would make our extraction quite impossible. Toto said. Ogi groaned. The ground bridge has pretty much been our go-to since this whole thing started. It's gotten all of us out a number of jams in the past. Given Shockwave's position in the Decepticon ranks, I suppose it was only a matter of time before he found a counter for arguably our greatest strategic advantage. Ratchet said. So, what do we do? Ironhide questioned. We can't let that kid get sold to the Khans, and we definitely can't let them get their hands on the Chinese Federation. We need to find a way to establish contact with Shink and the others. Optimus said. I believe I may have a plan, but we will need the assistance of virtually everyone present. What do you have in mind, Optimus? Cornelia asked. Europia. Meanwhile, in the forests outside Castle Weisswolf, the combined forces of the Holy Order of Michael and the Decepticons attempted to regroup together, having just lost more than 2/3 of their forces in the Autobots and Black Knight's surprise attack. Thunderhoof and Fracture both arrived in their vehicle modes alongside Skybite in his Shark mode, where the three Swordmasters arrived in their nightmares before the three Khans transformed to talk with the three soldiers as they exited their nightmares. How bad is it? Skybite got to the point. All in all, we lost almost 70% of our army. Swordmaster Brondello reported. And you? About the same as you, meatbags. Thunderhoof replied. Underbite's busy helping himself to all the broken metal in that mess, so at least someone's happy. Suddenly, Jeans Gratius rolled up alongside the vehicle mode of Quillfire. What are you doing? Grandmaster Shang never gave the order for a retreat. Take that attitude elsewhere, kid. Fracture put extra emphasis on the insult, much to Jean's irritation. You want us to go charging in when we're a mess. Quillfire transformed. We cannot retreat when so many of our own have fallen. The revolution demands justice. Well, there won't be a revolution if we're all dead. Thunderhoof exclaimed. Who cares about any of that? They all heard Arachnid's voice as her helicopter mode arrived before transforming and landing in front of all of them. Again and again, the Autobots, pets continue to humiliate us. Humiliate me. I will not stand for this anymore. I'll go up there and butcher RC, her precious pet Colin, that bothersome Suzaku, and everyone else, even if I have to pave the way with all your corpses. We will not sacrifice any more of our men in an honorless battle just to absolve whatever vendetta you have. Swordmaster Schultz argued. Not that a butcher like yourself would understand anything about honor. Swordmaster Dor added. That's quite enough. Steeljaw spoke through all their comms. Fracture, Thunderhoof, and you, the three Swordmasters, are correct. We need to regroup and come up with a decent plan. You would be wise to agree, Jean, Quillfire, Arachnid. Shin also spoke through the comms. If you really desire victory or revenge, then we must devise the strategy upon which we can best achieve it. This seemed to calm Jean down, albeit with reluctance. Understood, sir. All the other Decepticons and Euro-Britannian pilots calmed down a bit too, realizing this subject wasn't up for debate. But that didn't stop Arachnid from glaring viciously in the direction of Castle Weisswolf. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Shin stood on the shoulder of his Vercingetorix with Steeljaw standing beside him. Well, the Decepticon asked his human ally. Shin tried to focus his Geass but found a strong resisting force being pushed back against him. Nothing. My Geass is still there, but it's as if a steel wall has been built up around it. He said with a scowl as he thought about the immortal girl who put it up. That woman. They think removing your power is enough to cripple us. Steeljaw commented. Zero and his friends left us alive, he growled. I'll make certain that is the last mistake they ever make. Agreed. Akito, Zero, Brycegow, all their friends and allies, Autobot and human, we'll bury them in their precious castle, and leave none alive. Shin stated, making no attempt to hide his own bloodlust. Castle Weisswolf. Layla stood on the upper level of her castle's main hall with Lelouch, Akito, Claus, Sarah, Orpheus, and Maribel around her, while Ultra Magnus and Alita 1 stood on the ground floor on equal level with them. Thanks to our surprise attack, we were able to neutralize 2/3 of the enemy forces. Ultra Magnus reported. But the odds aren't quite even yet, they still outnumber us. We can't evacuate the castle or call in for backup either, that interference around the area prevents us from using a ground bridge. Alita added. Sounds like we have no choice but to dig ourselves in. Sarah commented before looking toward Lelouch. All things considered, Lelouch, we really shouldn't have spared Shang and Steeljaw back there. Perhaps you're right, Lelouch said with acceptance. Guess I let my arrogance get the better of me again. Nothing we can do about it now, though. Akito put in. Thinking too much about the past isn't going to get us anywhere. Right, Layla nodded. We'll need to bring everyone in on this, all pilots and Autobots, Major Hamill's security team, even the drones. We'll have 10 drones at the most. Claus said. The bulk of the parts were used for the Alexanders of Hamill's team. Please, let me help. Maribel stepped up. As you said, you'll need all the assistance you can get if you want to win this. Can we be sure you're on our side? Orpheus asked somewhat skeptically. Even if that Geass command was erased from your mind, you were still a Britannian princess and one of their top-tier anti-resistance fighters. And during all that time, I was pawn. Maribel replied with a scowl, not toward Orpheus but more to herself. I was a pawn for my father and his conspiracies, and then I was one for Steeljaw and Shang. She turned towards her half-brother. Lelouch, please. I know I probably have a lot to make up for, so let me start now by helping you and all your friends. Lelouch merely smiled. I'm sure we can find an Alexander for you to use. He said, causing Maribel to smile. It won't be the same as your nightmare but it's better than nothing. Thank you, little brother. Why do you keep calling me that? Lelouch questioned. You know I'm older than you. I know, but you've always been a kid at heart, and you haven't changed, what with you playing superhero and all, Zero. She teased, patting his head, resulting in Layla and even Sarah smirking, while Alita looked on with a genuine smile. Well then Maribel, welcome to the fold. Alita nodded. And where is your previous nightmare? Ultra Magnus asked. You used a different one on the ship before. The Lancelot trial is with my Glinda Knights. Maribel replied. So, I'm sure it'll be safe with everyone else. Well then, I believe it's time we come up with some kind of strategy. Orpheus began. However, before they could begin talking, Lelouch felt a little tired as he rubbed his eyes a bit. Hey, are you alright? Yeah, just a little tired. Lelouch replied as he rubbed his temples. Let's come up with a plan. However, what was most odd was that Lelouch wasn't the only one feeling tired. For some reason, Layla, Maribel, Orpheus, and even Sarah were starting to feel drowsy. Their eyelids felt somewhat heavy as their inner energy began to sink for some reason. For a brief instance, a Geass sigil briefly appeared in the eyes of Lelouch, Layla, Orpheus, and Maribel, even Chera's own Geass emblem flashed briefly as well. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Jetfire and the WZERO scientists continued to work on modifying the nightmares, seeing to it they were battle-ready as soon as possible. It's a good thing we got that nightmare data from that former princess, right Hilda? Chloe asked her comrade as she uploaded the data into the computer they were working on. Yeah, it'll give us plenty of insight on how the Britannian nightmares work. Hilda replied. Not to mention the improvements to our own technology. If you think what we have going right now is impressive, wait till we start working more with Cybertronian technology. Chole said. Once this is over, I'm sure Layla would want us working more closely with the Autobots and the Black Knights. True. Hilda nodded. Look at all we've accomplished by having just a small group with us. Both of them looked behind to a couch to see both Nina and Anna asleep, the latter's head leaned against the former, and both having a blanket around them. It's nice to see Anna have a peer. Chloe commented. That Nina girl is a genius. Well, that's to be expected when you work so closely with alien robots for an extended period. But yes, it is nice that Anna has another friend like her. Hilda said with a smile. At the same time, in another part of the laboratory, Sophie and Joe both stared at a screen that oversaw the entire castle as Jetfire walked up to join them. We're completely surrounded, the Arielbot informed. They'll shoot down anything that tries to leave, and we can't ground bridge out either. Sophie groaned in annoyance. It would help if we could learn how they're doing it. Based on this data, some sort of interference is being transmitted from another location. You mean a satellite? Joe asked. Probably, but we can't even track it. Sophie commented. Whoever designed that is a technological genius, I won't deny them that. Must have been Shockwave, and he was probably the smartest con on Cybertron. If there's anyone scarier than Megatron, it's him. Jetfire said. But we'll find a way out of this, I'm sure of it. Sophie gave a hollow smirk. I wish I had your confidence. Meanwhile, in the courtyard within the castle grounds, the Iron Will provided ample cover as well as a heat source for the Autobots, young Black Knights, and WZERO soldiers who seemed to be enjoying each other's company for the moment. Alright, ready, set, go. Rio snapped his fingers as Bulkhead and Grindcore, both lying flat on the ground, began their arm wrestling match. Aw come on Grindcore, you can do better than that. Yukiya told him. You got this Bulk. Rai cheered. Don't get cocky. Bulkhead told his fellow wrecker as he pressed forward. I was gonna say the same to you pal. Grindcore pressed back. Boys. Ayano gave a small sigh as she sat down in a circle around a campfire with Colin, RC, Shirley, Millie, and Strongarm. Not boys, wreckers. RC snarked. Just be glad they're not lobing. It's actually kind of fun. Colin commented. You wanna go around with me, Ayano? She offered her arm for arm wrestling as well. Nah, not my style. Ayano shook her head. Ya know Strongarm, I've been meaning to ask, why are you a police vehicle? Millie asked the rookie Autobot. It's not like there's a police force going around since the Autobots and Black Knights are technically military. Well, I like the colors actually. Strongarm replied. And it was my hope that after the war ended, I would be law enforcement. Wow, that sounds like it could be really cool. Shirley smiled. I'd think you'd make a great police officer. This resulted in a smile from Strongarm as she gave the girl a nod and thanks. Hey, didn't you used to be a police officer, Prowl? Monica asked as she sat down close to the aforementioned Autobot. Once, before the war, during the Golden Age. He explained as Gino, Rivals, Sideswipe, and Smokescreen joined in. I was also a space bridge operator along a friend of mine named Bluestreak. We used the space bridges to colonize multiple planets, that is until the Rust Plague set in. Rust Plague? Gino asked. Arguably what brought the Golden Age to an end. Sideswipe answered. A disease that instantly rusted and destroyed nearly all types of metal, including Cybertronian metal. It was a nightmare. Yikes. I heard those scraplet things were a problem for you, but I didn't think you guys could get sick. Rivals commented. You thought the Rust Plague was back. The Cybonic Plague. Or worse, Toxin. Sideswipe added. I heard about it too. Smokescreen added. When it couldn't be contained, Sentinel Prime ordered all space bridges to self-destruct so it wouldn't spread to Cybertron. That's how I lost my friend. Prowl said, looking down in grief. Bluestreak chose to stay behind as the planet he was on, Archon, had already been hit by the plague. I had to destroy it on my end, and, well, I'm certain you can figure out that was the last I heard from him. Both Gino and Monica looked in sympathy towards the Autobot as they both understood what that was like, to lose someone close to you. For Gino, he thought of Rin, the girl he fell in love with before joining the military. For Monica, she was reminded of her father. I'm really sorry, man. Gino told him as Monica put a hand on Prowl's to provide some comfort herself. I know the feeling too. Sideswipe added. I lost my brother Sunstreaker during the war. Several of the cadets I trained with didn't make it either. Smokescreen also said. But, that's no reason for us to stop, right? If anything, it's all the more reason to keep going, to make sure none of them died in vain, right? Sideswipe, Gino, Monica, and even Prowl looked toward him with confident smirks of their own. Right, they all said in agreement. Meanwhile, Alice appeared to sit all by herself, looking toward all the heroes in contemplation, as if she was trying to analyze something that wasn't there, something that only she could see. Or rather, what she tried to see but couldn't. Alice, what are you doing all by yourself? Nunnally asked as she sat down next to her and was later joined by Suzaku and Bumblebee, even Misty. They all seem so calm, even happy. Alice said. I just don't understand why. They're acting just like that time we spent with those women, but it's different. The enemy is literally right at our doorstep. Any moment now, we could be in for the fight of our lives. So why are they so upbeat, carefree, happy? Suzaku answered for her. Exactly. I don't understand. Alice said. It's okay, you don't have to understand, but maybe we can help explain it to you. Nunnally spoke first before Bumblebee chimed in. Everyone here knows what we're getting into, and what's in store for us. But they're confident they can win. The scout said. But how? How did they know that? Alice questioned. It's war. Anything can happen in war. And you're absolutely right, Alice. Suzaku spoke. Much like you, I used to work for the Decepticons as well as Britannia. I didn't quite understand these people before, how they could act like this when there was a war going on. I mostly thought that though because I thought I was on the right side, but I wasn't. After taking the time though to get to know them, I understand. These people, human or Autobot, they have something the Decepticons don't. Something they and Britannia have tried to take away for a very long time. What do they have? Alice asked. Nunnally took her hand and gave her answer. Hope. They have hope. Hope. Alice didn't quite understand. Yes. Hope for victory. Hope for a brighter tomorrow. Hope that when this madness ends, we can all live together in peace and happiness. Nunnally said with a smile. I wish that more than anything too, and I know we can get it if we all work together. And you're a part of that now, Alice. No matter what may have happened to you in the past, you're part of something greater now. Bumblebee added. Something bigger than just yourself. Suzaku also added. Alice still didn't quite understand, but at the same time, she couldn't help but smile as she did feel like she was part of something. During her time in the Geass Order, be it under Britannia or the Decepticons, all she knew was pain through their experimentations. The only source of comfort she had was that she was not alone. Sancha, Dalk, and Lucretia, they were in the same boat and could find comfort in each other throughout the pain. But now, she felt like she was part of something bigger and far warmer than before, and it made her happy. More than anything, she also wished the others could be here with her to experience this warmth. Sancha, Dalk, Lucretia, I promise, I will save you. All of you. Misty, who had said nothing, placed a hand on Nunnally's shoulder. You really know how to inspire people, don't you? Nunnally blushed at her friend's praise. Well, I had some good role models. She said, thinking of her brother and Optimus Prime. Grindcore's hand was brought down by Bulkhead, much to the cheers of Rai and Ryo and the comic disappointment of Grindcore and Yukia. And the winner is Bulkhead. Ryo cheered. Rai would have cheered alongside them, but for some reason, his eyelids began to feel heavy. He found himself wandering toward the circle where most of the girls were and ended up sitting down next to Shirley. Hey Rai, are you okay? Yeah, just tired, Rai stuttered before he leaned his head onto Shirley's shoulder, neither aware of the brief flash of Geass in Ray's eyes before his eyes closed. Shirley blushed for a moment, which only grew once she saw the smirks from pretty much everyone present, Autobot and human, all staring at her with knowing expressions. Oh, don't even start with me guys. Shirley told them, but that didn't stop her from looking toward Rai with a smile as he already fell asleep. Rai gave a gasp as he awoke, only to find he was no longer at Castle Weisswolf. Instead, he appeared to be standing on water, perfect and still, so much so that it perfectly reflected the starry sky above. He didn't even notice the Geass sigil actively glowing in both his eyes. What the hell? Where am I? Rai, is that you? He turned around in shock to see none other than Lelouch with an equally surprised expression, his own Geass sigil glowing in his eyes. Lelouch. Maribel also appeared alongside Layla, Orpheus, and even Sarah, her own Geass sigil shining. What is all this? Orpheus questioned, his Geass sigil glowing with everyone else's. What is happening? Layla questioned, her Geass sigil shining blue in her left eye. Sarah. I don't know, the immortal girl was just as shocked as the rest of them, the Geass emblem on her forehead shining brightly. Lelouch. Sarah. All of you. None were prepared for the sudden appearance of Optimus Prime before them, the white Prime Geass sigil in his optics glowing as well. Layla was more than a little shocked and awed, though she met Optimus before over their communications. This felt as if she was meeting him in person, which was a whole different experience altogether. Maribel, however, was more awed than the rest of them. Optimus Prime, the same being that stood alongside Zero and challenged Britannia, defeating its most powerful champions to bring freedom to the Earth, to say she was awestruck at finally being in presence was an understatement. Optimus. Lelouch exclaimed. You're here too. What is this place? There is no need to fret. A new and distorted voice spoke, all six of them gazing toward the source as it slowly descended to touch the water. They all stood on as the starry sky of night began to shift around to that of daytime. This entity appeared to be that of a young woman, with facial features similar to Sarah. She had black hair with light purple tips at the end, and dark violet eyes. She wore all black, save for red trims at her top, on the ends of her sleeves, and at the bottom of her shirt, even at her thighs and at the ends of her feet, all were in the shape of a Geass emblem. She even had one around her neck. You are all safe. For the moment, your minds are disconnected from your bodies. Once we're done here, you will return the very same moment you feel asleep, as if no time had passed at all. Who are you? Why have you brought us here? Optimus questioned. I am no one, outside the perspective of those who observe me. I don't exist, at least physically compared to all of you. Just think of me, or rather, perhaps you should think of us as a collective consciousness if that makes sense to you. She turned directly to Optimus Prime. Till all are one, that is what you often say, well that applies to Mirus in a literal sense. You could say I am the collective consciousness of humanity. An entity that affects the evolution of the human race. A caretaker of space-time if you will. You're connected to Geass, aren't you? Orpheus assumed. The only ones here are those who bear a Geass or a code. That is correct. The caretaker confirmed. Geass, as you probably know, stems directly into the minds and souls of those who use it. The soul of the individual, as well as their desires, help shape the power of the Geass while the power itself connects directly to one's mind. Lelouch's eyes narrowed. If you're connected to Geass, does that mean you're a part of Unicron? The caretaker shrugged. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I honestly don't know. What do you want with us? Maribel questioned. You brought us here for a reason, what is it? It wasn't our intent alone. The caretaker replied. It was because he wanted to speak with you, but required my aid to do so. Who? Layla asked. Me. Suddenly, the environment around them completely changed. All of them were more than a little shocked to find themselves floating in an endless void that stretched on in all directions. Rai and Maribel appeared the most panicked of the group, while Lelouch, Layla, and Sarah were simply shocked. Optimus felt himself drawn to a familiar presence that resonated with his spark and the Matrix as well. He turned around to the source of a brilliant light, which drew the attention of the others as the light faded to reveal a Cybertronian, one clad in golden armor with brilliant blue eyes, and a dark red cape that seemed to have shining stars inside it, almost as if there was an active universe inside. A Cybertronian. Lelouch looked in surprise. Is he an Autobot or a Decepticon? Maribel questioned and seemed more than prepared for a fight. He is neither. Optimus recognized him. He is Vector Prime. That got everyone's attention. One of the original 13. Sarah gasped before taking a look at him herself. She recognized the exact same figure she saw within the Matrix. Indeed. I am Vector Prime, the second Prime created following Prima. I am the Prime of Time. Rai actually chuckled slightly. Prime of time, caretaker of space-time, yeah, it would make sense why you guys would know each other, he said, glancing at the caretaker herself as she floated in the void with them. If you are one of the original primes, is this the matrix of leadership? Layla asked, looking at the void around them, remembering Sarah telling her about when she formed a contract with Optimus and what happened in that experience. No, this is not the matrix, Sarah said. That is also correct, Vector Prime confirmed. This place is called the Dead Universe. Dead Universe? Orpheus questioned. A place of infinite nothingness, where neither time nor space exists. Vector Prime explained. Thanks to my own power, as well as that of the caretaker, we were able to connect to your minds and bring you here. Once we're finished her, your minds will return to your bodies, no harm done to any of you. But, how are you here? In this, dead universe? Rai asked. I thought all the original primes were dead. Most of us have indeed died, but not all. Vector Prime replied. Optimus here is the reincarnation of the 13th, that reveal took most of them by surprise, save for Sarah and Optimus himself. Aside from him, only 2 of the originals still live, myself included. He then gazed directly at Sarah. All those primes you saw in the Matrix, including the one that was identical to myself, you could say are our spiritual clones, created from the portions of our sparks that dwell within the matrix of leadership. But because I still live, I am connected to the matrix as well and am aware of what had transpired when you formed a contract with them and Optimus. Sarah nodded in understanding, even Lelouch seemed to get it. And who is this other prime that still exists? Mary Bell asked. He is, not worth mentioning, but that is not why you were called here. Vector Prime said. Indeed. The caretaker spoke. Vector Prime decided that it was time for all of you to know about the origins of Geass. Before anyone could respond again, the scene shifted. This time, they no longer appeared in the dead universe, but on Earth, in the middle of an ancient city, one that seemed to mix cultures of ancient Greece and Egypt. They all saw humans wandering the streets of the ancient city, each one wearing white robes with various jewelry all over their bodies. But really got the group's attention, was the familiar emblem on each of their foreheads. I remember seeing this, Lelouch noted, looking toward Sarah. When you formed your contract with me, I saw glimpses of an ancient civilization. So did I. Rai noted. Where or when are we? What is going on? This is Earth in ancient times. The caretaker answered for all of them. The name of the civilization was lost to the sands of history, predating any recorded history humans have of their civilization on this planet. Thanks to my power, we are able to see everything that has transpired here. But we are as ghosts, unable to interfere. Vector Prime explained. The subject may be too difficult for the human mind to grasp. Not if you haven't seen A Christmas Carol. Mary Bell noted. These humans, Optimus noted how they all interacted. They came and went, appearing to act rather casually. And yet, there was some sort of harmonization to their movements, almost like they were in perfect sync with one another. I see you have noticed it, these humans are not quite like the ones you've encountered in the past. The caretaker explained. In this moment of history, humans existed together through the collective consciousness, almost as if they were a singular entity. Like a hive mind? Orpheus asked. Like those Insecticons? Not quite. Vector Prime replied. It's difficult to put in a term you can understand, but humanity once existed in perfect harmony with each other, and I don't just speak of harmony as peace. They moved almost similar to machines. The individual human was aware of his existence and experienced emotions as the rest of you do, but they were also aware of those around them too. Almost a form of telepathy even, there were no secrets, no conflict, it was almost perfect. I'm assuming it didn't last forever though. Sarah said. You assumed correctly. The caretaker confirmed. In this time of harmony, there was an anomaly of sorts. An unexpected variable. And what would that be? Lelouch asked. His response came in the form of the scene shifting again to the top of what appeared to be an ancient pyramid where a single man sat on a large, stone, throne. This man had dark skin and long black hair that stretched all the way down his back, along with a beard. He had amber eyes that glowed like fire, with a strong will and a sense of compassion in them. He wore a long white robe and had some kind of headpiece that seemed similar to a mix between a Roman crown and a crown of thorns. But there was unmistakably the glowing Geass emblem on his forehead. Sarah gave a gasp as she recognized this power. He has a code. He does. Vector Prime confirmed. This is the anomaly. A human born with his own free will, separated from the collective consciousness. He was completely independent. We're not certain exactly how this came to be, but perhaps as a result of this anomaly, something manifested inside him as a form of what you call a code. The caretaker revealed. The power of immortality, as it was first thought. This man became the leader of this civilization and would lead it into prosperity for thousands of years. His name was Saturnus. Vector Prime continued. He was a strong yet caring individual, who only cared about the betterment of his civilization. Despite all the other humans being connected through the collective consciousness, he eagerly urged them to voice their own thoughts and wills, encouraging independence, well as independent as one could get anyway. Despite that attempt at humor, this was quite a startling revelation for each of them, though it did answer a few questions. The code, the same power that gave Sarah and Victor immortality and the ability to grant Geass to others, was an anomaly of this collective consciousness that humanity once shared. Saturnus, Layla noted. The name, it sounds similar to Saturn, the Roman god of sowing and seeds, as well as time. Also known as Kronos, the king of the Titans in Greek mythology. Lelouch added. Ironic, certain myths depict Kronos as a ruthless tyrant until he was overthrown by his son, Zeus, while here in reality, he, or at least his inspiration, was a benevolent ruler. Myths are stories, Optimus said. And much like stories of fiction, they can be fabricated and changed, depending on the individual who writes it. Most of the young humans all shared knowing expressions, understanding how Britannia has easily fabricated much of the history most of them were taught, trying to make it seem like their conquests were righteous. History is written by the victors, after all. Getting back on track, if this Saturnus was such a good guy, why did this society collapse? Rai asked. Vector Prime and the caretaker shared a serious look with one another before the scene shifted once again to another point in time. Now Saturnus was no longer alone, two people stood by his side. On his right was a young woman who looked almost exactly like the caretaker, only her skin was much more colorful, and she seemed to have a cheerful smile on her face. On Saturnus' left, was a man with darker skin like Saturnus, wild hair, a diagonal scar was present on his face, and his eyes were blood red that seemed to radiate hatred. However, unlike Saturnus, neither of them had a Geass emblem on their forehead, but their eyes still had the titular sigils. These two are the children of Saturnus. The caretaker said. The daughter was named Yahweh, and the son Belith. Unlike the rest of you, who were granted Geass later in life, each of them was born with their power, likely a result of being fathered by one with a code. And like their father, they too acted independently, separated from the collective consciousness. So, this is how Geass came to be. Optimus noted. I recognize those names. Maribel said. Yahweh is one of the names of the biblical god. While Belith is a name given to a demon who serves as one of the many kings of hell. Orpheus added. What sort of powers did they have? Rai asked. As each of you know by now, Geass is reflected by the user's most inner desires when it manifests itself. Vector Prime explained as the scene shifted to Yahweh being surrounded by various men and women. Her Geass glowed brightly as each of them had a pair of red rings in their eyes and smiled even more brightly while in their presence. Yahweh's power removed all forms of negativity from those around her. Be it physical or emotional pain, or even negative thoughts and feelings. Her power brought joy and relief. He continued to explain before the scene shifted again, this time revealing Belith, smiling malevolently, standing in the middle of night in a puddle of blood. People around him were killing each other with their bare hands or whatever objects they had around them. Nearly every one of them looked in shock, Layla covering her mouth in horror while Rai, Maribel, and even Lelouch looked with wide eyes. Sarah and Optimus appeared the least surprised, but this was still difficult for either of them to watch. Belith's ability however was the opposite. He instilled negativity, driving his victims to madness. But why though? Layla asked. Why is it that the daughter was noble and good, seeking to help others, while the son was, so, cruel? So monstrous. That's just how things are. Vector Prime answered. For every force in the universe, there is an equal and opposite. Light and dark, order and chaos, good and evil, that also applies to individuals. While it is true that our lives can be shaped and changed as we go on, there are those who are born with a sense of good in them, but by extension, this means there are also those who are born with a great darkness. Simply put, there are people who are just cruel or shitty. Orpheus said with a slight scowl. Or just born bad. Upon realizing that he would outlive his own children, Saturnus sought to pass on his code to a successor. The caretaker continued. He would want someone to help humanity continue to prosper and live in harmony until they could find someone else to be worthy as well. I'm assuming his first thought was to pass it on to Yahweh. Lelouch deduced. And it's also easy to assume that Belith did not take that well. Sarah added. Both are correct. Vector Prime replied. The scene shifted once more, this time at the top of the pyramid late at night, the full moon shining over them as Saturnus placed his hand on Yahweh's forehead. A bright light shined in between them with the Geass emblem on Saturnus' own forehead glowing before it faded away completely as the light died down. When Saturnus removed his hand, the emblem that was the code of Geass was now on Yahweh's forehead as she smiled lovingly toward her father, who smiled back. The very instant Saturnus passed the code on to his daughter, he was killed by his own son. No sooner than the caretaker said that a stone knife shot out of Saturnus' chest. Much to the horror of Yahweh, as well as the shock of Optimus, Lelouch, Rai, Layla, Maribel, even Sarah. Saturnus' lifeless body fell to the ground in a puddle of his own blood, revealing Belith with the knife in his hand before he moved to slash his sister's throat, causing her to fall back as another blood puddle formed under her. He tried to press his hand on her forehead and take the code, but he was unable to. However, he found himself unable to steal his sister's newly acquired code. The caretaker continued. The power made her immortal, but it would seem that the power can only be passed along if the user intends to do so. However, Belith was unable to give up. Once again, the scene changed to reveal something that not even Optimus could have expected. At the bottom of a stone trench, was a large pool of a dark and glowing purple liquid substance, with crystals all around the sides. These crystals seemed to radiate evil itself. Just looking at this made Lelouch, Maribel, Layla, Rai, and even Sarah shudder in fear, never having seen this substance before, but Optimus recognized it right away. Dark Energon. Indeed, the blood of Unicron, himself. Vector Prime said in a grave tone. Why is that on Earth? Lelouch questioned. We're not certain, actually. Vector Prime revealed, much to everyone's shock. Wait, you don't know? Maribel questioned. I thought you were supposed to be the god of time or something. Rai exclaimed. Can't you just rewind, or go back even further to find out? Before I answer that, you need to see what happens here. Vector Prime said as they all saw Belith walking toward the pool of dark energon. He also carried Yahweh over his shoulder. The immortal girl was bound with rope while a cloth was tied over her mouth to keep her from calling for help. Belith set her down before the pool as she desperately looked toward her brother, pleading with her eyes not to do this. But he only scoffed before kicking her into the pool of the dark substance, much to everyone's shock before jumping in himself. He picked up his bound sister and placed his hand on her forehead again, over the Geass emblem as he tried to take away her code by force. However, something unexpected happened. The scene suddenly began to shift and changed, almost as if the area around them became engulfed with some kind of static interference that prevented the group from seeing clearly. What is happening? Layla questioned. The mysterious interference came to an end, revealing the clear image of the dark energon pool, with the lifeless bodies of Yahweh and Belith floating in the dark liquid, much to the group's horror. This is why I am unable to provide an answer as to why dark energon is on your planet. Vector Prime told them. There is some sort of temporal interference that prevents me from seeing the origin of this pool, just as that same interference prevented us from seeing what exactly happened at that moment in time. My guess is that this interference originates from Unicron himself. But, I thought Unicron was destroyed. Lelouch said before turning to Optimus. Primus and the original 13 defeated him, didn't they? Defeated Unicron. Yes. Optimus confirmed. But destroyed? No. Unicron is not a being that can be defeated with sheer force. He is, simply put, evil incarnate. Evil itself is a force of nature, it cannot be created nor destroyed, just changed from one form to another. So long as evil exits in this universe, so too will Unicron. To say all the humans present were shocked would be an understatement. They were basically told that the force of ultimate evil will always exist and could practically be with them always in every evil that they have encountered and will in the future. Well, that's rather unnerving. Sarah commented. So, what happened here? Orpheus asked, getting back to the scene in front of them. Yahweh and Belith's physical forms died. The caretaker revealed. However, something else was born from the ashes. Something abominable. A ghostly figure arose from the lifeless body of Belith, as it and Yahweh's corpse were consumed in purple flames before being reduced to ash. The ghostly figure was a single skull, with a glowing red Geass emblem carved onto its forehead. Belith's spirit had somehow obtained the code, likely through the use of dark energon. However, much like Vector Prime, we are unable to get a clear understanding of how the process occurred. The caretaker explained, but the result was something truly horrific. Belith became a force of pure malice and destruction. Like myself, he doesn't exist on the mortal plane anymore. He is an abomination born of greed, hatred, and malice, one capable of granting the power of Geass to others, but unlike you and the one you call VV, the caretaker looked at Sarah briefly. The Geass granted by Belith are corrupted, unstable, and consuming. Like what happened with Mao? Rai asked. No, his Geass was natural. The caretaker answered. But his mind and will were weak and could not handle the power. History has proven that there are others who are capable of mastering Geass. However, the Geass offered by Belith are already corrupted, warping the minds of all those who obtain it. So, he is somehow still able to give Geass to others. Maribel asked. Even though he's, more or less a ghost now? Yes, the caretaker confirmed. I've seen that skull before. Sarah revealed, much to the group's surprise. When I first made contact with Shang, I saw a vision of it. Is that how he obtained his Geass? Yes, but Shang was not the only one. Vector Prime revealed. After this event, when Belith's physical form died, along with Yahweh, the civilization they once governed with their father fell to ruin. The people were too dependent on a leader, but with nobody to lead them they were aimless and directionless, eventually falling to ruin. As a result, the collective consciousness of humanity became disconnected with all, and the humans that would later arise all became independent and self-aware, which led to the eventual formation of your civilization. And throughout those years, Belith would be drawn to specific individuals and form contracts with them, granting corrupted Geass to those who would ultimately bring ruin to their whole civilizations or at least try to. The group was then treated to multiple moments in time. The first being the Aztec Empire falling to ruin as all the people killed each other left and right, men and women, even children with knives and blunt objects beat each other to death with them, and at the center of it all was the ruler of the Aztecs, his corrupted Geass flashing in his eyes as he laughed maniacally, even while being literally stabbed in the back by one of his own subjects. The next was Attila the Hun on horseback along with an army of his own tribe, laying waste to a village. He too had a corrupted Geass in his eyes as he cut down a woman holding a baby. Then there was Genghis Khan, a corrupted Geass also glowing in his eyes as he directed his army to destroy everything in their path along the Eurasia continental area. There was even Vlad the Impaler, witnessing hundreds of people being impaled by large wooden stakes and left to bleed out. He was covered in their blood and even licked it from his hands as his own Geass shined brightly. Finally, there was also Elizabeth Báthory, who stood in her own personal dungeon with a whip as she snapped at the naked back of a young woman, while several other women around her were being tortured and mutilated, all while she had a sadistic smile on her face and a corrupted Geass of her own. But behind each and every one of them, there was the evil skull entity that was known as Belith, who had granted each of them their power that ultimately consumed them completely. Optimus, Lelouch, Rai, Orpheus, Maribel, Sarah, and Layla were brought back to the dead universe to face Vector Prime and the caretaker as they continued to explain. Belith's only desire is to corrupt and destroy, much like the dark energon substance that likely gave rise to his inhuman power. The caretaker said, he still exists even now, always trying to find someone to act as a champion, so to speak, and ultimately destroy everything around them. I'm surprised he didn't seek my father, given his own vile actions. Lelouch said with a scowl while Sarah looked away slightly. That may be because Belith had found someone worse than Charles Z. Britannia, someone that you know all too well, who has the most corrupted Geass to ever exist. Vector Prime said. Megatron. Optimus said with realization. Wait, but I thought Megatron's Dark Geass was because of him experimenting with the stuff in Dark Energon. Rai recalled. That's not quite correct, Vector Prime explained. Because the blood of Unicron was used in the process, Belith likely channeled his power through that same substance and directly into Megatron's essence, which led to the creation of his Dark Geass. That would explain why his and Shin's felt so similar. Sarah muttered. In a way, Belith is Megatron's contractor, and he isn't even aware of that. It would make sense. Optimus seemed to agree. Megatron's actions have ultimately led to the destruction of our world, and he wasn't even under Belith's influence at that time. So, it is understandable why Belith would be drawn to Megatron. Okay, so how do we stop them? Maribel questioned. I mean, when it comes to Shin or Megatron, we can stop them by killing them. Easier said than done for the later. Sarah commented. But what about Belith? How do we stop a ghost? Orpheus asked, following Maribel's trail of logic. We don't believe you can. The caretaker revealed. Belith isn't a tangible foe that you can simply best in combat. Much like the power that created his abominable form, he himself has more or less a force of nature, one that cannot be truly destroyed. The best that can be done, is stopping his contractors from destroying everything. And there is nothing else? Layla asked. I'm afraid not. Vector Prime shook his head. So, now you know. You know how Geass came to be, and just how much it has impacted your world more than you realize. But, this does not answer all our questions. Lelouch said. How did Sarah and Vivi get their codes? Where did those codes even come from? Is there a way to remove the code power entirely? That last question caught Chera's attention. Was Lelouch asking whether or not her code could be removed? Was he trying to figure out a way to make her mortal again? A part of her had hoped there was a way, well, a way that didn't involve her passing her immortality onto someone else. The last thing she wanted was for somebody to endure the same curse she had for centuries. I'm afraid we cannot answer that question. Vector Prime replied. Much like the incident that created Belith, there is some sort of temporal interference that prevents me from learning the truth. Which leads me to believe that Geass may indeed be connected to Unicron, more so than what allowed Belith to become what he is now. There is one other question though. Rai said, taking a look at the caretaker. If that skull thing is Belith, are you Yahweh? Yes and no. The caretaker answered. As I explained before, I am the collective consciousness of humanity. Although they may no longer be connected together through me, or rather as, when they die, their souls ascend to the afterlife, but their minds return to me, their origin. When Yahweh died, like everyone else, her consciousness returned to the source. Our form somehow took the appearance of Yahweh, thought I cannot quite understand why. Perhaps it is because she died while in possession of her code that was stripped away from her. I may be the collective consciousness of humanity, but I am not all-knowing, so I do not have all the answers. But, this does give us quite a few answers to questions many of us have been unable to solve. Sarah said. It was true, this actually answered many of the questions she had when she was with Charles and the Geass Order. It was theorized that there was an ancient civilization that revolved around Geass, but Charles and Vivi weren't too interested in that, just their own petty dreams. She couldn't help but mentally note the irony. She was receiving help from the very being that she, Charles, Vivi, and even Marianne planned to destroy to create their paradise. However, I suspect there is at least one remaining question you wish to ask. Vector Prime said, glancing toward Lelouch. You are a Prime, one of the originals. The young revolutionary began. But unlike the others, you still lived. Save for Alpha Trion, most of the others all died. That is one way to put it. Vector Prime confirmed. So why didn't you help the Autobots? Lelouch questioned in a somewhat accusatory tone. Why didn't you help them fight Megatron? You're one of the original Primes that has powers over time itself. You could have ended the war for Cybertron and saved so many lives. If it weren't for that, Megatron would have never come to Earth, and Britannia wouldn't have become the death regime that it was under my father's reign, and so much suffering could have been avoided. So why do you hide in this void just watching when you can help at any time you want? You're a disgrace to the title of Prime. Lelouch, Optimus tried to speak to the young hero. No, I'm actually gonna have to agree with him on this. Rai said, also looking at Vector Prime. The Decepticons and Britannia hurt and killed so many of the people we cared about. Why haven't you done a thing to stop it? I lost someone that I loved, my life was a living hell because of Britannia, because of their own secret plots behind the Decepticons' back. Orpheus, fists clenched as he remembered the woman he loved dying in his arms. Why didn't you do something? Vector Prime remained stoic before he responded. You believe I'm a disgrace to the title of Prime. Well, I'm glad to know you hold it in such high standards, which is more than I can say for most of our successors. Didn't Optimus tell you how the war began? The previous line of primes up until Sentinel Zeta Prime seemed more concerned with their own power and greed, which led to the formation of the caste system, the corruption, and eventually the war. They thought the title of Prime would grant them anything, but they were nothing more than hopeless politicians, who have completely lost sight of what it truly meant to be a Prime. And even then, my siblings weren't all that perfect as you claim they are. That got their attention. Granted, there were many I held a great deal of respect for, I still do. Vector Prime continued. Prima, Alpha Trion, and Solus to name a few. However, after the battle with Unicron, his own dark life force that had been spilt in that battle, began to slowly corrupt many of my brethren. We became divided, plotting for our own ambitions, accusing one another, one of which even took the life of the one he claimed to love. That surprised all the humans present, but Optimus had a serious look on his face, as he knew full well just who Vector Prime was referring to. Our brotherhood fell apart and those that survived went to their own devices. I choose to retreat to the dead universe, where I could observe the flow of time throughout the universe in peace. Vector Prime continued to explain. As for why I choose not to intervene in the war for Cybertron, even if I had intervened and stopped the war, it wouldn't have changed the inevitable outcome. What are you talking about? Maribel questioned. I am the Prime of Time, I observe the flow of the timeline with my power, I am merely an extension of Primus. Vector Prime tried to explain as best he could to them. Through my observations, I realized something. Everything that exists eventually comes to an end. Whatever we built, will inevitably be destroyed, be it an object, the lives of others, or even civilizations. If I did stop the war, it would have only prolonged Cybertron's destruction. You don't know that, Lelouch told him. I'm sure Optimus and his comrades have told you of many great catastrophes that befell our planet. Vector Prime replied. The Rust Plague, the invasion of the Quintessons, any one of those could have destroyed our planet. There could have been another plague, or another invasion. Or Cybertron could end naturally, such as our star dying out. Even the suns, the most powerful forces of nature in this universe must eventually die. Some way, somehow, Cybertron would have still died. Your world will eventually fall as well, be it a natural end or one of your kind's own making. Everything that is created will eventually be destroyed, your lives included. That is not me speaking as a pessimist or anything, it's a fact, a constant cycle of creation and destruction. It cannot be changed or halted by any force. He's not wrong. Sarah had to admit, speaking as someone who's seen everything and almost everyone around her come and go. While that may be true, our lives are still worth living. Layla stated firmly. I never said they weren't. Vector Prime replied. It's not that I devalue life, I've just come to accept that all life is finite. This dead universe that we dwell in, just because no life exists here does not make this place malevolent. Death is merely the absence of life, nothing more. You're right, Layla admitted. Death does come to all, eventually. I know that none of us are going to be around forever, and maybe that peaceful future that all of us hope to build will come to an end one way or another. It won't stop me or any of us from creating it. The fact that our lives are finite is every bit the reason to live our lives to the fullest. Layla, you are absolutely right. Lelouch agreed. And until that future exists, temporary or not, I won't stop fighting. Neither will I, Rai stated. This is the life that I chose as well, and I have no regrets. Orpheus said. For a long time, I didn't see much value in anything at all, not even in the lives of others, myself included. Sarah said. But, not anymore. I want to become mortal again, so I can live a real life, maybe even make a family, and see them grow and make lives of their own. And I'll do everything I can to protect what I have now too. She looked towards Lelouch, Layla, and Rai with smiles, which they returned as well. Well, I sort of feel the odd one out since I only just joined you guys. Maribel commented. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to give everything I can to help you. You already know we've accepted your help, Maribel. Lelouch told his half-sister. I know, I just wanted to be a part of whatever's going on here. She joked, resulting in Lelouch, Orpheus, and Sarah smirking, while Ryan and Layla laughed. Optimus smiled himself before turning to his predecessor. Vector, you are not wrong when you say all that is created must eventually be destroyed. That is something we have no control over. However, what is also true is that each of us can control what to do with our own lives. I have seen many who would waste their lives, as well as the lives of others, to achieve their own ambitions. But, I have also seen those who would give their lives for the happiness of those around them, even to those they don't even know. Life may be finite, but it is sacred, nonetheless. We will end this war and build a peaceful future for this planet, even if it won't last forever. Vector Prime stared at Optimus for a moment. You are every bit as naive as your previous incarnation. However, I always did admire that sort of aspect about him. I may have lost faith in my siblings a long time ago, but perhaps you may be worth it. Before anyone could respond, the scenery shifted around them to reveal the orbit of Earth, where they could all clearly see a Cybertronian satellite hovering over the planet. This is what prevents your forces from accessing your ground bridge. Vector Prime explained. This satellite currently hovers in orbit directly above Castle Weisswolf. A similar device is housed within the Vermilion Forbidden City, under heavy guard. A third device is at New Count. So long as these devices remain active, you cannot activate a ground bridge within their range. None of them had expected to learn this. That explains quite a bit, but why tell us this? Rai asked. We had thought you would not intervene in this conflict. Lelouch said, looking somewhat skeptically at Vector Prime. This is a test of sorts. The Prime of Time responded. One that will determine whether or not I will place my faith in you, and the cause you fight for. However, this is the most you will get from me. I will not intervene any further in your conflict with the Decepticons. However, should there be any developments with Belith or even Unicron, perhaps you may hear from me. But depends entirely on all of you, and what you do with the information I have given you. Layla smiled. Well, you have given us critical information that may have saved many lives. Thank you, sincerely. She turned to the caretaker. And you as well. Indeed. Optimus agreed with a smile of his own. The fact that both of you chose to share this information with us is proof that you may indeed already have faith and are hoping that it is reassured. Don't overthink it, the caretaker said. We still believe that humanity wielding Geass is a mistake and that perhaps it should be removed from your world entirely. If you can do it, by all means go ahead. Rice said. We've got enough problems with these Geass-fueled psychopaths in our lives. Well then, good luck with defeating them. The caretaker said in what one could assume was a statement of humor. Your minds will now be returned to your bodies, as if no time at all has passed since you fell asleep. With that declaration, the spiritual forms of Lelouch, Optimus, Layla, Rai, Maribel, Sarah, and Orpheus all vanished, leaving the caretaker and Vector Prime alone in the dead universe. I wonder if it was a mistake to reveal all of this to them. The caretaker wondered aloud. That is the point of this test, to see whether it was a mistake or not. Vector Prime said, but whether they pass or fail won't change the inevitable outcome that this world will die. They will only decide whether or not that end will come sooner or later. Either way, it should quite a show. The caretaker commented. Lelouch's eyes opened, sitting up from the chair he fell asleep in. He took a look at his watch. The time hadn't changed in the least since his eyes closed. If anything, only a few seconds had gone by. He knew for certain what he and the others experienced was not a dream, it was real. While he was given many answers, he still had a great deal many questions as well. But they could wait. The young revolutionary took out his communications device and spoke into it. Ultra Magnus, I know what we have to do. Gather the others, I have a plan. Siege of Castle Weisswolf. It was in the dead of night as snow continued to fall all around the area. The golden nightmare known as the Vercingetorix stood on a snowy ridge, across from a lake, staring at the castle that was the enemy base known as Weisswolf. One would call this scene rather peaceful, a complete contradictory to what was occurring within the pilot's mind. Ever since his encounter with that immortal girl, Shin had felt his Geass being suppressed. He could feel it was still there in his mind, only know it felt as if it was locked behind several steel vaults, and he was unable to tear them down. And yet, he could still feel his power on the other side, violently shaking and raging against its confinement, longing for freedom and blood. "Don't worry," he muttered to himself, as if he was speaking to his power like it were some kind of pet. "I'm sure I'll find a way to free you, and then we can finally put an end to this accursed world." Lord Hyuga. Jean's face appeared on the nightmare's screen, bringing him out of his trance. "All our forces are prepared and await your order." "Very good, Jean." Shin nodded with a pleased smile. "We'll wait till dawn, give it a little more of a dramatic flair." "Yes sir. But, Lord Hyuga, if I may?" Jean asked. "What is it? Once we've sieged control of the enemy base, and have conquered Europia, where do we go from there?" Jean asked. "What's the overall endgame?" Shin smiled in a mix of sincerity and sadism. "We'll meet with Megatron, and work with the higher-ups of the Decepticons to wipe out all remaining resistance on this planet, and run it dry of all its resources." Jean looked in surprise. "What do you mean, all remaining resistance? As in, the rest of the Black Knights and Autobots?" "Most certainly, but also the rest of humanity," Shin revealed, causing Jean to gasp. "Other than the ones the Decepticons wins to enslave, of course. Not to mention those like us who work with them of our own volition. The entire human race." Jean stuttered. "I'm actually most thankful for the Decepticons' arrival to our planet," Shin began. "Since the beginning, humanity has been slaughtering itself, and yet, they refuse to go completely extinct. Quite surprising. But maybe the Decepticons can give them the push they need, over the edge, and plummet into oblivion." "Why though? Why would you want humanity extinct?" Jean asked. I understand the annihilation of our enemies, but..." "Jean, you don't have to think so militaristically," Shin told her. "This isn't about Euro-Britannia's victory over the EU, nor is it about the Decepticons' domination of this world. The human race has done nothing but bring pain and misery to itself. They fight and betray one another for the most pitiful of reasons. They are all parasites, and I wish to see them exterminated. Down to the last child." Jean was unable to contain the look of horror on her face. Do you really feel that way, about all people? Our own countrymen, our own soldiers, or, even, me?" Shin smiled. "Jean, you have been nothing short of loyal to me since I've found you. You've done so much for me and never asked for anything in return. You are one of the few exceptions to the parasitic nature of mankind. I'm grateful for everything you've done. Rest assured, once we're done here, I'll see to it you remain by my side. We can watch together as this world burns. Now, please stand by and await the time to attack." Despite that assurance, Jean didn't feel any better. "Yes, Lord Hyuga." That was quite the conversation. The vehicle mode of Steeljaw arrived by the Vercingetorix's side and transformed to reveal the wolf-like Decepticon. "You certainly have a way with words, Shin." "Ah, so you've hacked my communications?" Shin asked, sounding more amused than anything. "That's rather rude." Steeljaw snickered. Joking aside, he looked somewhat serious. "Are you sure young Jean will continue to follow the plan, now that she knows your intent?" She did seem rather hesitant. "And hesitance can sometimes lead to betrayal, I've seen it myself." "You don't have to worry," Shin replied. "Jean's loyalty to me is rock solid. I've seen it myself, she'll kill for me if I say so." This caused a chuckle from Steeljaw. "I knew I liked you." However, their conversation was interrupted by the sounds of ignition closer toward Castle Weisswolf. From just beyond the castle, Steeljaw and Shin looked to see what appeared to be a rocket launching straight up into the sky, the blazing trail illuminating the darkness of the night. "Apollo's chariot, I assume," Steeljaw commented before he and his partner received a communication. "I trust the two of you are witnessing the projectile being launched into the sky." Skybite communicated. "Yes, prepare long-ranged weapons to shoot it down," Shin told him. "If it's out of range, send our flyers." "That may not be necessary," Skybite said. "I just performed a long-ranged scan, and the vessel is completely empty." "Empty?" Steeljaw and Shin both questioned at the same time. "Indeed. There are no weapons or munitions, no lifeforms, Cybertronian or otherwise." Skybite confirmed. "It's a bluff," Steeljaw said with a slight chuckle. "They probably want us to think they're running away. With our anti-ground bridge satellite that prevents an escape, Apollo's chariot is the only means for them to leave." But they also know it runs the greater risk of being shot down. So more than likely, it is a bluff to lure us away while they find some other means to escape. Or to better prepare themselves for battle. Shin said, smirking. Getting rather desperate, aren't we, Zero? Sky Bite, have our forces check the perimeter of the area to see to it our enemy doesn't slip away. Steeljaw ordered. If we don't find anything, we still attack at dawn. Understood. Sky Bite responded. Apollo's chariot had just exited the atmosphere, its engines ceasing function and breaking off from the main vessel. The seemingly empty rocket let zero gravity take it straight towards its intended destination, the alien-made satellite that was projecting a special kind of interference over Castle Weisswolf that prevented the use of ground bridges. The rocket then began to break apart and disperse into several pieces, revealing a single specially designed Alexander Nightmare. This Alexander was modified by Jetfire and outfitted with a special cloaking device that would render it invisible to any kind of scans. And the pilot of this Nightmare was none other than Nina Einstein, wearing a special space suit. Her Nightmare activated once it was in zero gravity, the screens powering up and locking onto the satellite. Target located. Nina pressed a few buttons on the Nightmare and operated the controls, activating small thrusters on the Alexander's sides to allow her to steer and move towards the satellite. Once she was close enough, the limbs of the Alexander attached themselves to the device, securing its position. I'm locked on, hacking the device now. Nina began to work at a holographic keyboard as the attached limbs began to connect her directly to the satellite. Once she was in, she was quick to contact the main base of her resistance force. Nina to Ratchet, I'm in position. Ready to connect my unit and the adjacent device to the ARC systems. I'm already receiving the data. Nina, pay very close attention. The Autobot medic instructed. The next morning, all the Decepticon and Euro-Britannia forces had assembled just outside the castle, organized in groups that appeared to have the perimeter surrounded. From the north, we had Steeljaw and Shin in the Vercingetorix. On the south, were Fracture and Thunderhoof and their assembled group, with Swordmaster Brondello. At the east end were Arachnid and Skybite alongside Swordmaster Dor. And on the west, there was Underbite with Quillfire and Swordmaster Schultz. The sun had just risen over the horizon as the countdown on Shin's Nightmare screen quickly dropped to 0. Now, shall we begin? All forces, attack. Steeljaw ordered, prompting the Nightmares and Viacons to begin their charge on Castle Weisswolf. Though the Swordmasters led the charge, the Decepticon leaders along with Shin hung back as their infantry went on the attack first, opening fire with rifles and energon blasters at the wall that encircled the castle. The second the walls were struck, however, automated turrets appeared on the sides of the wall and returned fire. The frontmost Viacons and Nightmares were quickly gunned down before those behind them took cover. Shin chuckled as he witnessed it all. That's why in chess, the pawns go first. We can't get through. Dor exclaimed. Our numbers are spread too thin, and the defensive perimeter is sealed tight. Prepare to fall back and regroup. Negative, all units hold your positions. Arachnid told everyone over the comms before smirking evilly. Their attention is too focused on us, rather than the real danger beneath. Truth be told, this attack was only a distraction as she telepathically communicated to 4 Insecticon bruisers, one at each of their locations, that tunneled their way underground. They dug their way deep under the walls before making their way closer to the surface. Just as they each made their way toward the bottom of the walls, the bombs that were attached to each bruiser went off. 4 large explosions erupted at the foundations of the walls all around the castle's perimeter, causing 4 sections of the wall to collapse and create large openings that would allow their forces to break through. There it is. All units, move in. Shin ordered as the invading forces entered the breached perimeter. On the south side, the vehicle modes of Fracture and Thunderhoof were the first to enter, followed by the Viacons in their helicopter and jet modes in the air above them, with the Euro-Britannian Sutherlands right below. However, their advance was halted by a blast of energy that exploded in front of them, prompting the Decepticons to transform as they and their Euro-Britannian allies saw from the air what had fired that shot. That's close enough, Suzaku declared, the Lancelot Albion hovering closer to the ground as it was joined by Geno's Tristian Divider, with Rio's Alexander Valiant standing on a rooftop of a small building. And standing in front of the 3 Nightmares was the Autobot commander Ultra Magnus with Sideswipe and Smokescreen on his flank. You will not take this castle. Ultra Magnus stated. I'd recommend you surrender. Swordmaster Brondello gasped as he recognized two of the nightmares. That's the Lancelot, piloted by the 11th Knight of Euphemia. And, the Tristian, the Knight of 3, Gino. Not anymore, I'm a Black Knight now. Gino said. Yeah, you guys really should be running. Smokescreen said with a smirk. Fracture chuckled. Yeah, I don't think so. He launched a pair of projectiles from his shoulders, which struck Smokescreen to knock him down. The projectiles transformed into the mini-con pair of Erazur and Divebomb, both of whom chuckled before they jumped down on Smokescreen. The Viacons and Britannian Nightmares opened fire, with Thunderhoof charging with his antlers before he was caught and halted by Ultra Magnus right as Suzaku, Ryo, Sideswipe, and Gino charged into the enemy, weapons at the ready. On the east end, Arachnid and Skybite flew from the hole in their respective helicopter and shark modes, leading the large group of Viacons and Sutherlands with Swordmaster Door right behind them. But just before they could get too much farther in the castle's courtyard, Arcee's vehicle mode drove out from around the corner before she transformed and leapt up to tackle Arachnid's vehicle mode and send it crashing down the hill. What in? Skybite was taken by surprise as he transformed, right before he and the whole group of enemy units were opened fire upon by Alita 1, Strongarm, and Ayano's Alexander Valiant, already taking down more than a few enemy forces. Skybite transformed back into his shark mode and took to the air, ready to fire on the three from above, only to get shot at from higher in the sky as Jetfire's jet mode shot down from the clouds, prompting Skybite to fly away as Jetfire gave pursuit. Arachnid tumbled in her vehicle mode before transforming and recovering on the ground to face her Autobot rival again. RC. And where's sweet little Colin? She would soon get a response in the form of red energy projectiles shooting down from the sky, prompting Arachnid to backflip and avoid getting blasted as she saw the Gurren hover down closer to the pilot's Autobot companion. Right here, Arachnid. Colin glared from inside. This is the end of the line for you. RC glared as well. No more escapes. Arachnid snickered. Finally, something we can agree on. Guess it's a good thing I brought some friends along. She reached out with her telepathic link, calling in a trio of Insecticons to emerge from the ground below them. They immediately swarmed the Gurren while Arachnid opened fire with her Energon Palm at RC. On the west side, Underbite's larger vehicle mode barreled its way through a large stone building, clearing the path for Quillfire's vehicle mode, as well as that of the Viacons and the Sutherlands led by Swordmaster Schultz. However, one Viacon was quickly sniped in its right tire, causing him to derail and crash before a Sutherland was sniped in the head. The group quickly stopped as the Decepticons transformed to see Yukia's Alexander Valiant a few dozen meters in front of them with a large nightmare rifle in its hand as it gave a friendly wave. Hiya, Yukia said rather casually. Suddenly, lightning and energy blasts rained down from the sky, forcing the enemy forces to fall back and find cover as Ray's Raiden shot down alongside Monica's Florence Nero and Orpheus Guka Byakuan. Fire! Attack! Kill them! For the revolution! Quillfire ordered as he shot his quills at the incoming Nightmare trio, with the Viacons and Nightmares firing as well. Underbite was about to make his way towards Yukia, only for the vehicle modes of Bulkhead and Grindcore to emerge in the form of a surprise attack and ram Underbite on the side, sending him crashing through several structures before he recovered to face the two large Autobots, who transformed in front of him. You bots want a piece of this? Underbite challenged. Yeah, piece by piece work for you. Grindcore responded as he and Bulkhead charged the large Decepticon. On the north side of the castle, what appeared to be the largest force of Viacons and Sutherlands poured in from the hole that had been made into the wall. As they entered the castle grounds, Steeljaw and the Vercingetorix had somehow managed to climb to the top of the wall as they saw their forces continue further into the castle, only to be immediately fired upon by the defenders. Bumblebee rounded one corner as he fired with his Energon blasters, taking down two Viacons and one Sutherland as they shot at him. With them so focused on the scout, it left them vulnerable for Chera's pink Akatsuki to fly in from above, just as Alice's Alexander Valiant and Prowl came in from the right and left sides respectively, engaging the enemy in close-ranged combat. Well, they're certainly putting up an impressive fight, aren't they? Shin commented. Of course, they are. Both villains looked up to see the Shinkiro descend toward them almost dramatically. They're the type to give it their all in a fight. Zero. Shin greeted casually. Or do you prefer, Lelouch? It won't really matter, since your revolution is about to come to an end here and now. No, Zero responded. Your siege is about to end here and now, with your defeat. Oh, I highly doubt that. Steeljaw said with a roar as he leapt to grab and tackle the Shinkiro, his sudden attack sending them both toward the ground. Shin would have joined them, had he not felt a familiar presence not too far from his location. Akito gave a gasp as he felt the sickening presence send a shudder down his spine. He's here. His newly acquired Alexander Liberté drew its rifle and fired on the charging Vercingetorix as it leapt from the wall, landing down hard on the ground before charging directly at the smaller Nightmare, slashing with its massive blade as Akito parried with his Alexander's katana, backing away to give himself some space, but Shin wouldn't have it as he gave pursuit, slashing his larger weapon as Akito tried to block and parry as best as he could. Where are you going, Akito? Shin teased with a malevolent smile. Come give your big brother a hug. I think not. Shin was caught off guard as the Alexander Red Ogre suddenly appeared, charging in its insectoid mode before transforming to draw both its sword and slash down at the Vercingetorix. But Shin reacted quickly enough to block the attack with his Nightmare's more complex weapon, but was quickly put on the defensive from the Red Ogre's relentless slashes. It's no Lancelot trial, but it'll do. Maribel thought to herself. You and I have a score to settle, Shin. She exclaimed as the Red Ogre's swords continued to clash against the Vercingetorix's weapon, but the larger Nightmare swerved around the fifth strike and went on the offensive. Is that you, Maribel? Shin asked as they continued to parry weapons, with Shin pushing forward, prompting the Red Ogre to fall back in its insectoid mode and fire back with its guns, but Shin continued to charge. I'm surprised you're here and fighting for your former empire's worst enemies, no less. How much did you have to beg to get that Nightmare? He sneered. Maribel was backed into a corner, but she would soon get assistance as Akito's Alexander Liberté opened fire with its rifle, charging at the now defensive Vercingetorix as it parried its weapon from the slashes with Akito's katana. You can't win this, brother. I'm free from your influence, and your own power has been sealed away. Akito told him, resulting in Shin scowling as they continued to parry weapons, allowing Maribel to join in as Shin struggled to hold them both back at once. He directed the Vercingetorix straight towards a stone building, allowing both Alexanders to follow him before the Golden Nightmare leapt straight to the top with Akito and Maribel close behind just as Shin turned to face them and swing his Nightmare's massive blade, which they both evaded. I don't need my Geass to kill either of you. I can do it the old-fashioned way. Shin exclaimed as he charged forward with a roar. However, while these battles occurred all over the castle grounds, there was a smaller force moving in. This one consisted of only a couple Nightmares with a few foot soldiers as they came up over the northwest wall. Just as they made it over the wall, however, several Alexander drones appeared and opened fire. After finding cover, the Sutherlands returned fire. The drones did their best to avoid getting shot at but were quickly gunned down with no casualties on the Euro-Britannian side before pushing forward. We're moving in, one soldier reported. Lady Rowe, we've entered the castle perimeter and are moving on to the command center. Lord Hyuga is engaged with the enemy leader. Roger that. Jean responded. Remember, Lord Hyuga wants Breisgau alive. Acknowledged. Jean was currently in her Grachus, which was in the WZERO underground facility farther away from the castle, and the rest of the battles. This was Shin's and Steeljaw's plan. While the bulk of their forces kept the enemy distracted, not only would a smaller force move in to capture Layla, but she would acquire all the data she could on the Apollo's chariot. The Grachus was inside the underground launch site as she remotely downloaded all the information directly into her Nightmare. She knew Shin's orders. She understood them. She wanted to follow them. But, why did she feel this hesitance? She felt it when she heard Shin's overall plan: help the Decepticons wipe out humanity. The extinction or near endangerment of the human race somehow left an odd taste in her mouth. She had no love for Euro-Britannia or the rest of the world. The only reason she joined the military was to get closer to Shin. He and his adoptive family took her in from off the streets along with Ashley Ashura. He gave her purpose, she owed him everything. She would follow him into hell and back for him. So why did she feel this way? Stop. Jean gasped in surprise to see an Alexander facing her. Please, we don't have to fight. Let's just talk. The Geass cockpit opened as Jean slowly stood up and leapt to the ground, raising her hands. Likewise, the Alexander powered down to reveal the pilot was none other than Shirley as she stepped out as well. Guess Maribel was right, Shirley thought to herself. She remembered how strictly Lelouch was against this idea of hers, with almost everyone else as well. But after hearing everything from Maribel, about not only the enemy's possible plan to steal data on Apollo's chariot, but who would likely be the one to do it. If they were wrong, she'd retreat quietly and report this. If they were right, well, it took Maribel to convince Lelouch to let Shirley do this, as reluctant as he was. Jean quickly drew a pistol she had tapped to her back and aimed at Shirley. You think you can scare me with a bluff? I see that nightmare doesn't have any weapons, and I remember you and your friends. Your stature, your tone, everything about you says you are no soldier. You're right, I'm not. Shirley told her. I work in the Black Knight's intelligence, and I'm rarely on the field. My name is Shirley Finette, and you're Jean Rowe. Or rather, your name is Jean, right? Jean narrowed her eyes. How do you know that? Maribel told me, after she spoke with your friend, Ashley. Shirley revealed, catching her attention as she tried to walk forward. You were an orphan, growing up on the streets like him, right? But Shin Hyuga Shang took you in. You joined the military to work more closely with him, right? You wanted to get close to him, because you love him. A gunshot was fired, the bullet passing by Shirley, grazing off a few of her hairs, but Shirley remained unfazed. That was a warning. Get down on the ground. Jean told her. I won't hesitate to kill you. You want to steal Apollo's chariot for Shin, who'll give it to the Decepticons. Shirley continued. I don't know what exactly they want with it, but it can't be good. She could tell from the look in her eyes that Jean knew that as well. But you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for him. I told you to get on the ground. Jean exclaimed. I know what you're feeling right now. Shirley said, taking a few steps forward. I used to be like that too. There was someone that I loved, and after learning just what kind of man he is, I wanted to make myself into someone who could be worthy of his love. But, no matter what I did, even if he did care for me as a friend, he wouldn't love me back. Stay away. Jean shouted, her body shaking as she shot another bullet, this one almost grazing Shirley's arm, but she didn't stop coming closer. And I know, that no matter what you do or how much you want to devote yourself to him, he won't love you back either. Shirley continued. And even more, you know this is wrong. I see it in your eyes. The Decepticons are going to destroy this entire world, and I don't think you really want that. Shut up. How I feel is irrelevant. The only thing that matters now, is Lord Hyuga's objective. I'm going to make it come true. Shirley was right in front of her, but even though Jean kept the gun aimed at her, her hands were shaking and so were her eyes. With a firm yet understanding and compassionate look in her eyes, Shirley slowly reached her hands forward to gently lower the gun, making sure her own hands were over Jean's. Loving someone doesn't mean being a devoted servant. Shirley said. It's about helping them be the best person they can be. I've come to terms and accept that the person I once loved doesn't love me back, but that doesn't mean I don't care about him anymore, or that I've stopped helping him. I've also come to meet so many more people I'd never even thought I'd meet, people from all over this world, and even beyond. I've even found someone new, she smiled before she pulled Jean into a hug. You don't have to close your heart to all of it. There's a whole world out there, with plenty of good people. The world isn't perfect, but it's one worth protecting. One worth loving. Jean's eyes were already beginning to water. Why are you trying to make me stop? Because that's what it means to care, and to love. Shirley said, smiling sincerely as she kept embracing the girl. Seeing the good in people and helping them be the best they can be. Jean honestly couldn't believe that. In just a few words from a complete stranger, she no longer had the will to fight. Zero scowled underneath his mask as he fired the Shinkiro's wrist-mounted cannons at the charging Steeljaw, who swerved around each strike in his vehicle mode, gunning straight for the Black Nightmare before transforming to leap up and land a flying double kick on the Shinkiro, knocking it back. Not giving him time to counter, Steeljaw leapt and grabbed onto the Shinkiro's shoulders, slicing toward the cockpit with his claws. Before he dealt too much damage, however, Zero transformed the Shinkiro into its shuttle mode and shot into the air, spinning to throw Steeljaw off before transforming just as the Decepticon was sent falling and crashing onto the ground. He then leapt and ran away from more of the cannon blasts Zero shot his way. Not too far from their location, Akito and Maribel tried to come at the Vercingetorix from both sides in their respective Alexanders. The Golden Nightmare swung its sword to parry both their strikes before falling back, using all four of its legs to take a tremendous leap, landing at the top of an old castle building, prompting both Alexanders to climb up in their insectoid modes after him. However, just before they could reach the top, Shin pulled the Golden Nightmare's shotgun out to obliterate the ledge of the wall, causing the two Alexanders to fall. Akito, grab on. Maribel offered the Red Ogre's hand to the Liberté, which Akito took as they fell. The Red Ogre threw the Liberté away, where it spun and transformed to land on its four legs in its insectoid mode to cushion the fall just as the Red Ogre dug its blades into the wall of the building and halt its descent. Just then, Shin had shot his Vercingetorix forward, leaping and landing on the ground before charging at his younger brother. He's right on you. Maribel warned on time, which allowed Akito to transform his Alexander Liberté into its battle mode, drawing his katana to parry the strikes from the Vercingetorix's axe, but Akito was clearly struggling. You weren't as ferocious as you were before, little brother. Shin said with a sadistic smile. Am I correct to assume your moniker as the Ghost of Hannibal was due to letting your Geass command drive you, turning you into a mass murderer? He questioned as Akito was knocked down, his Alexander Liberté pushed down a hill and sent tumbling near the cemetery. He tried to get back up, only to quickly bring up his katana and block the axe strike of his brother's nightmare, two weapons locking. Hang on, I'm coming. Maribel was about to provide some assistance, but Shin drew the Vercingetorix's shotgun with one hand and fired at her, keeping her at bay while the other hand pushed further against Akito's Liberté, something he was struggling with. You think that immortal freeing you from it was a blessing? Shin continued. But all she really did was take away your greatest weapon. You shouldn't underestimate your brother. The Vercingetorix was suddenly pulled away from Akito by an invisible force before being kicked back. Shin scowled as Prowl turned himself visible. What he may lack with ferocity, he makes up for with friends. Just as Shin pulled his nightmare up, it was quickly pelted in the sides by the Alexander Valiant, being piloted by Alice, as she shot forward in its insectoid mode before it transformed and leapt toward him, drawing out one of its wrist blades to gun for the cockpit, but Shin quickly brought up the Vercingetorix's hidden blaze luminous sword to slice away at the hidden blade, forcing Alice to fall back as she leapt away and regrouped with Prowl, Maribel's Red Ogre, and Akito's Liberté. Brother, you took away one family from me. Akito said with a steeled expression. Geass or not, I will not allow you to take another. Shin scowled. You are such a naive fool. He shot his Vercingetorix forward, intent on facing all four at once. At the same time, the Shinkiro continued to shoot more energy blasts from its wrists at Steeljaw, but the Decepticon quickly leapt behind cover of a nearby building. Zero shot his nightmare up into the air and looked behind the building, only to find the Decepticon was no longer there. Lelouch looked around in the maze of buildings and trees for any sign of his Decepticon foe. He's good, but maybe I can draw him out, goat more on his pride. Lelouch thought. What's the matter, Decepticon? Megatron was never one to hide behind cheap tricks. As monstrous as he is, I at least admire his tendency to face his opponents head-on. Give me some credit, Zero. Steeljaw's voice echoed through the area. I may not be a gladiator of Kaun like our esteemed leader, but when you spend your whole life in Cybertron's slums, literally fighting every day to survive, you pick up a few tricks. So that's why you're with the Decepticons. Zero called out, still trying to goad on the enemy's pride. Because life was unfair to you. Just like most of your Black Knight companions, Steeljaw responded, still unseen. Lelouch scowled. He could tell from Steeljaw's tone and words that he was turning his own tactic against him, insulting his friends. As for why I bear the logo, let's just say I grew tired of constantly being at the bottom. Suddenly, Steeljaw broke out from a tree line on the Shinkiro's flank, grabbing at its legs and pulling it down closer to the ground. Steeljaw then leapt at its back to pin the nightmare down. I'd much rather claw my way to the top, and I won't stop till I get there. Steeljaw continued, an evil and wild smirk on his face. No matter who I have to coerce or kill to do it. Before he could bring his claws down, however, a certain black and yellow car came driving out from around the side, before transforming to reveal Bumblebee as he pulled back a fist and smashed Steeljaw in the face, sending him flying and crashing through several trees. Bumblebee then helped the Shinkiro up as the pink Akatsuki also arrived on the scene. "You good in there, Zero?" B asked. "I'm fine, thanks B." Lelouch smiled under his mask. "What happened with the rest of the enemy forces?" "We've taken care of most of them on the north end. Our allies can handle the rest," Sarah reported. Steeljaw recovered with a slight growl as he saw the trio standing in front of him. "Bring however many friends you want, I'll just skin every single one of you." Despite the charging and wild Decepticon, Lelouch smirked underneath his mask. "Yes, keep attacking. It means he's buying the performance." The sky around the south side of Castle Weisswolf lit up with explosions as several jet and helicopter vehicons flew around and fired energon blasts at the airborne Lancelot Albion. Suzaku had drawn his Nightmare's blades and sliced to block several of the shoots before shooting into the air, an extra boost provided by his energy wings while the jet vehicons flew after him. But Suzaku quickly stopped his Nightmare's float system and let the Lancelot fall, holding out both swords and spinning around to cut down the Viacon jets that had caught up to him before activating his energy wings again to fire several projectiles at the remaining helicopters and jets. Several were able to escape, but a few others were blown to pieces. Meanwhile, on the ground, Thunderhoof charged Ultra Magnus once again. He rammed his antlers into the Autobot commander's chest, actually knocking him down. But Magnus quickly delivered a kick into Thunderhoof's chest before getting back up to deck him across the face before striking with a roundhouse kick to send him tumbling through a few old buildings. Thunderhoof then transformed and drove away to avoid the Energon blasts Ultra Magnus shot in his direction. Sideswipe used his own sword to parry the strikes from that of the Nightmare piloted by Swordmaster Brondello. As they continued to parry, Sideswipe swerved around a vertical strike from the Sutherland's blade, allowing the red Autobot to slice upward with his sword and sever the Gloucester's right arm. "Damn it!" Brondello cursed as he pulled his Nightmare back, allowing some Nightmare reinforcements to come in and open fire, prompting Sideswipe to transform and drive away. Several of the enemy Nightmares were quickly halted by machine gun fire as the Tristan Divider descended in its fortress mode. "Listen guys, you really oughta just leave this place. You can't win, no matter what," Gino advised. "I don't mind cutting down the Decepticons, but I'd rather avoid killing people if I can." "Go to hell, traitor." One of the Britannian pilots cursed as the Sutherlands fired on the Tristan Divider, where it quickly transformed into its Nightmare mode and found cover behind a building alongside Sideswipe. "Yeah, these guys are following a deranged psycho who sold out his own country, remember?" Sideswipe reminded the former Knight of Three. "They don't seem like the type to listen to reason." "I know," Gino commented, sounding exhausted and sympathetic at the same time. "Just wanted to try anyway." The Tristan then drew its dual blades before flying over the building to engage the enemy with Sideswipe. Rio roared as his Alexander Valiant's axe was used to parry Fracture's own blades. Rio tried to push forward, leaping over Fracture while slicing toward his head. But Fracture parried the blow by crossing his arm blades, and right as the Rio's Alexander landed, Fracture kicked it in the back to knock it down. When he tried to get up, the Alexander's axe arm was pierced by Fracture's right arm blade. "You're out of your league, kid," Fracture mocked as he twisted the blade, severing the Alexander's weapon arm before kicking it into a nearby wall, and into an old building. Rio coughed slightly as he glared at the Decepticon. "Actually, I think I'm ready. 'Cause I've been doing the same thing you cons have been doing before I joined the cause." "Yeah, what's that?" Fracture questioned as he loomed over him. "Play dirty." Rio shot his Alexander's remaining arm forward, drawing the hidden blade and gunning for the eyes. Fracture was able to parry the attack just in time, but his face did get cut, creating a scar over his right eye and temporarily blinding him, allowing Rio to transform his Alexander and fire its chain gun at Fracture, scoring several direct hits and knocking him down onto the ground with a thud. Divebomb and Erazor, both who had climbing up all over the downed smokescreen, slashing him with their claws, looked in shock at seeing Fracture fall. "Master, no." They were about to rush and aid him, but this left them open for Smokescreen to up and grab them before slamming them both together and throwing them in two separate directions. I hate fighting guys smaller than me, Smokescreen said as he wiped some spilled energon from his mouth. But those little creeps are worth the exception. He quipped his energon blasters and fired at the two mini-cons as they transformed into their missile modes and flew in the air around the young Autobot. On the east side, Jetfire was currently engaged in an aerial dogfight with Skybite, firing his rapid-fire energon blasts at the flying Sharkticon, who quickly flew up and over to get behind Jetfire, open his mouth and fire a pair of missiles. Jetfire, however, quickly turned around and transformed, to fire precise energon blasts to obliterate the missiles before letting himself fly into Skybite's face, grabbing his shark mode and punching him repeatedly before Skybite shot himself straight down toward the ground and transformed to throw Jetfire off before landing on his feet. Jetfire, however, was quick to recover as he shot from the snow and dust to deck Skybite across the face right before they engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile, nearby, Iano's Alexander Valiant had drawn its long sword, engaging Swordmaster Dor's Gloucester in a sword duel. Despite the Britannian soldier's own experience, Iano was holding her own quite well. Clashing blade for blade as the more nimble Alexander leapt from the ground to a nearby wall and behind the Gloucester to try and impale it from behind, only to be shot in the back herself by a squad of Sutherlands and Viacon troopers, forcing Iano to retreat as she transformed her Alexander Valiant into its insectoid mode and scurried around a nearby corner as Strongarm provided cover fire with her energon crossbow. "We got them on the run. Let's finish them off," Dor ordered as the Euro-Britannian Nightmares and Viacons continued to shoot in their direction. However, this made them blind to a sudden surprise attack from Elita 1, who leapt down from the top of a stone wall, drawing her arm blade to slice Dor's Gloucester in half at the cockpit. Dor gave a final scream as his nightmare exploded, killing him. Elita 1 had landed in the middle of a group of enemy soldiers, quickly drawing her energon blasters to shoot off the heads of a Viacon and a Sutherland, spinning around almost like a ballet dancer while she continued firing to take down several more enemy units, forcing the remaining Sutherlands and Viacons to pull back. At the same time, in the courtyard, Colin lunged her Surger Claw into the face of an Insecticon, quickly activating it and sending a wave of radiation burning through the large insect Cybertronian before it finally exploded. The remaining two Insecticons tried to charge her from both sides, but the Gurren leapt into the air before flying to land behind one of the Insecticons, charging it as she drew her Nightmare's knife to slash all over its body, moving nimbly around the large clawed arms that the Insecticon slashed and threw her way. The Gurren landed in front of the Insecticon before driving its knife into the Insecticon's throat, quickly twisting it to decapitate it, leaving Colin to face the single remaining bug-like Decepticon. Nearby, RC drew her arm blades to parry the strikes from Arachnid's spider legs before they lunged forward with enough force that even as RC blocked them, she still skidded back slightly. Arachnid then extended her hooked hand to its chain before lashing it out at RC. However, the blue female Autobot allowed her left arm to be ensnared, despite the hook piercing her arm, and grabbed the chain with her right hand before using both her arms to pull Arachnid in close where she dealt a kick to her face and knocked her down. However, right before RC could come forward, right as she leapt to slice one of her arm blades toward her enemy's throat, Arachnid shot a surprise strand of webbing that knocked and stuck RC to the ground. Colin noticed the predicament her partner was in as Arachnid loomed over her. RC. Colin quickly fired a point-blank Surger attack at the Insecticon, blasting a hole through its chest before zooming toward her trapped partner. Arachnid brought her hook close to RC's face and smiled sadistically. "Oh, I am going to enjoy finally putting an end to our little song and dance routine, RC. As much as I love them, all good things must come to an end. But don't worry, I'll be sure to send your new partner to join you and both your old ones, right before I get to that worthless Suzaku and those bothersome sisters Yuffie and Cornelia." She heard Colin's roar of fury as the Gurren shot at her. Arachnid instinctively brought up her spider legs to block the Surger Claw, but Colin had already activated it to blast a wave of radiation to melt and destroy Arachnid's extra appendages, blasting her away in a fiery heap. "That was for all the men, women, and children you slaughtered in the ghettos," Colin exclaimed, using her knife to cut RC free as they faced Arachnid again. She looked at the smoking stubs of where her spider legs once were before scowling like a maniac and attacked the two, swinging her hook hand wildly, but RC caught it and used her arm blade to sever that arm before cutting off the other. That was for Tailgate, and all the other Autobots you butchered too. RC said before delivering a kick to the limbless Arachnid as she was knocked on the ground, RC and the Gurren looming over her. Tell me, how does it feel to be dismembered? To be torn apart? To be helpless? RC exclaimed. Oh, spare me. Arachnid spat hatefully at the pair. How is this any different? How are either of you different from me? Go ahead and kill me, but just know, if hell does exist, I'll be waiting for the both of you, with whatever sharp thing I can get my hands on, and the determination to find out if you can die twice. You hear me? Even in death, you'll never be rid of. She was silenced when Colin grabbed her by the face with the Surger claw and lifted her up. Oh, will you just, shut up? She activated her Surger claw, sending a wave of radiation through Arachnid's body before she was finally lit up from the inside with an explosion, killing the sadistic Spider Khan once and for all. Good riddance, RC said with a scowl before turning to Colin as the pilot climbed out of the Gurren's cockpit. With their most hated and personal enemy gone, it felt like a weight was lifted off both their shoulders. Colin said nothing as she shared a smile with RC, who simply gave an approving nod before looking toward the sun with a relieved and satisfied smile of her own. On the west side of the castle grounds, Yukiya remained in the back in his Alexander Valiant, using his long-distance cannon to pick off the Decepticon and Euro-Britannian forces one by one with precise headshots, though this made it easier for the enemy forces to concentrate their firepower on his location, forcing him to retreat deeper into the castle grounds in his Alexander's insectoid mode. Don't let him get away. Swordmaster Schultz ordered. You've got problems of your own. Orpheus declared as the Guka Byakuin flew down to engage Schultz's Gloucester while Monica in her Florence Nero fired several gunshots at the Viacons and Sutherlands around him, allowing the Byakuin to engage Schultz in a brief duel, before Orpheus fired his Gefgen blaster on the Byakuin's forehead to short out the Gloucester. What? Schultz questioned as his nightmare was suddenly out of power before the Byakuin drew a blade from its 7-type armament gauntlet on the right arm. Sorry about this, Orpheus said with some remorse as he cut down Schultz's nightmare, killing him in an instant. Quillfire launched every deadly quill he could muster at the charging Raiden, with Rai drawing his nightmare's katana to cut down several of them, closing in on Quillfire, who quickly drew 2 of his own quills to use as makeshift weapons to parry the katana before being backed into a corner. Tyrants. All of you. The Decepticon reign is the only true revolution. The fanatic Decepticon exclaimed. Destruction of the human race. Death to the Autobots and the Black Knights. You cannot. He was silenced as Rai threw his Surger claw out to grab him by the face. Your revolution is a joke. Rai stated. Ours is the one that's going to save this world. You truly think you can stop the mighty Lord Megatron? Quillfire continued to exclaim. Your mission is folly. My regards to Breakdown. Rai narrowed his eyes as he activated his Surger's claw, sending a large jolt of electricity all throughout Quillfire's insides, frying all his circuits before his body went up in an explosion. Meanwhile, Underbite was being grabbed at both sides by Bulkhead and Grindcore. The former formed his mace as he and the later smashed at Underbite's face before the large Decepticon tried to shake them off. He then spotted the remains of several Britannian Sutherlands, leaping up to finally loosen the grip of the 2 wreckers before charging forward and breaking from their hold. Bulkhead and Grindcore watched as Underbite easily devoured the nightmare remains, giving him a boost of energy. Oh yeah, tough, toned, and talented. Underbite flexed his muscles before getting ready to charge. Get ready to say, hello, to Earth's moon, Autobots. Grindcore looked ready to charge back, but Bulkhead grabbed him by the shoulder and gestured to the stone building behind them, as well as his own mace. Grindcore seemed to get the idea as he smirked before turning back to Underbite. Come on, muscle mouth. Show us what you got. Grindcore challenged. Underbite responded with a charge, right as Bulkhead and Grindcore smashed the building and dove out of the way, causing Underbite to crash into the weakened structure, which then collapsed over him. Bulkhead chuckled. Guess he doesn't know his own strength. He and Grindcore shared a high five. Back on the north side, Steeljaw was knocked back as he used his claws to parry the strikes from Bumblebee's katana, with Steeljaw swerving around to punch Bumblebee across the face, who retaliated with a punch of his own, followed by a jumping kick to knock Steeljaw against a tree. Bee then leapt away to allow Chera's pink Akatsuki to fly forward, swinging her katana, which Steeljaw ducked under to avoid getting decapitated as the tree fell. Steeljaw tried to run backwards as Sarah continued to advance on him, parrying claws with katana once more. However, Sarah flew away as the Shinkiro came up from behind Steeljaw, blasting at him from the rear, the shockwave of the explosion sending Steeljaw up into the air and crashing to the ground. The wolf-like Decepticon picked himself up with a growl. "They're coming at me with hit and runs, keeping me on my toes and from retaliating. Clever." He extended his claws as he faced the three of them again before charging with a roar. Nearby, Shin's Vercingetorix slashed relentlessly with its dual axe and sword, parrying the strikes from Akito, Alice, Maribel, and Prowl as they maneuvered around him, coming at him from all angles and keeping him from going on the offensive. Akito and Alice's respective Alexanders went at him from the left and right, forcing him to block both their strikes with his sword and axe, while Maribel tried to come in from behind. The Vercingetorix tried to kick back with its rear legs, but Maribel anticipated this as she leapt up to deliver a double-bladed strike to the Vercingetorix's back, sending it tumbling toward the oncoming Prowl, who leapt upward to deliver a flip kick, followed by a sweep of his legs to trip up the Vercingetorix, before coming in with several punches and chops, ending with a jump and kick to the face, knocking the Vercingetorix down. Shin growled with such hate and ferocity as he saw all four opponents rushing him. He knew he was being overpowered, and he hated it. This hate further fueled all the hatred and madness that had been building up inside him since he was a child, to where he exploded in a roar of rage, pulling the Vercingetorix up and charging at the heroes with such speed that they couldn't counter as he rammed them to knock them down. Shin gunned for Alice first, slicing his Nightmare's sword at the Alexander's midsection, cutting it half. Fortunately, Alice leapt out of the cockpit and rolled on the snow before the Nightmare exploded. Maribel tried to come in next, drawing the Red Ogre's dual blades, but Shin intercepted and blocked them with the Vercingetorix's sword before thrusting his axe forward, the bladed tip on the end like a spear. Maribel gave a surprised scream as her cockpit was almost completely pierced, but she maneuvered it out of the way just in time as the spinning blades on the axe cut the cockpit open like a sardine can, causing the Red Ogre to fall over and be rendered inoperable. Fortunately, Maribel survived. Prowl leapt onto the Vercingetorix, wrapping his arms and legs around its top as the wild pilot tried to shake the Autobot loose, but Prowl maintained his grip as Akito tried to come in for the finishing blow. This ends now. Akito was ready to cut down his brother's Nightmare and end the fight, drawing his Liberté's katana. The look of pure rage on Shin's face continued to spur as something inside him broke. Something that had kept his inner power and malice restrained. Suddenly, two Geass sigils formed in both his eyes. Sarah gave a gasp. With Bumblebee and Zero still fighting Steeljaw, she turned back towards the struggle against Shin with a look of fear on her face. She could feel his wild Geass breaking free as the last of her barriers had broken down. Shin gave a roar like a demon, the Vercingetorix leaping into the air to avoid Akito's strike, taking Prowl with him and fired a slash harkened toward the ground some distance away from Akito, allowing the Vercingetorix to be pulled in that direction, angling itself so that when it crashed, Prowl took the brunt of the impact and was forced off. Akito quickly shot his Alexander Liberté to try and stop his mad brother, but the wild Shin was already recovering as he sliced with both his weapons, striking with such force that it shattered the Liberté's katana. The Vercingetorix threw the sword away to grab the Liberté by the throat and drove forward to press and pin Akito's Nightmare against the cliffside that served as the castle's foundation. "Akito!" Sarah exclaimed, catching Lelouch and Bumblebee's attention, while Maribel and Alice, even the recovering Prowl, looked in clear shock. A sadistic and maniacal smile formed on Shin's face, reading his weapon for the fatal blow. "The time has come, Akito, for you to finally die." Right before he could lash out with his weapon though, right before either the Shinkiro, Bumblebee, Chera's Akatsuki, could make their move to stop him. "Lord Hyuga, stop." That was the only warning he would get as the Grachus suddenly came in to ram its shoulder into the Vercingetorix, sending it crashing through several trees, much to everyone's surprise. "Please, Lord Hyuga, just stop." Jean attempted to plead with him, standing up from her Nightmare's cockpit, just so he could see the look of desperation clear in her eyes. Most of the group were nothing short of shocked, but that surprise came to an end as a certain Alexander made its way to the group, particularly to the Nightmare-less pilots. "Alice, Maribel, are you two all right?" Surely, Alice said in surprised acknowledgement as Shirley's borrowed nightmare stood rather close to them. Mary Bell couldn't help but smile. Guess you got through to her. Shirley said nothing in response, but smiled and nodded, nonetheless. Jean, what are you doing? Shin questioned as the Vercingetorix pulled itself up, a seemingly stoic look on Shin's face as he remained seated in his nightmare. I understand why you want to do this. Jean tried to plead. But this won't solve anything. All you're doing is just killing. That's not what will end the suffering. Maybe you don't care about the world, you just want to end your own suffering, but causing others to suffer, I can't go through with that. You saved me, welcomed me into your home, gave me a place in this world. Tears flowed down her face. You were my hero. So, I won't let you become a monster. Please just stop. I'm not saying to join the other side, just stop. Please. We can walk away from this. All this hate and death. Please. Lord Hyuga, I love you. All remained silent, even the recovering Steeljaw as he pushed himself up from a tree as he waited, mostly out of curiosity, to see what Shin's response would be. Shin's only response at first was a small sigh before he spoke. Jean, if you truly do feel that way, then die. Jean gasped in horror as the Vercingetorix raised its axe, ready to cut her down. However, before it could be brought down, the Shinkiro had already moved in front of Jean in her nightmare to activate its shields and block the axe strike. This is how you treat people who care about you. Lelouch said with a scowl, all the while Shin's scowl grew even more, his teeth gnashing together like a wild animal. How sad. The shields broke, right before the Shinkiro fired a point-blank hadron blast from its right to the Vercingetorix's head, disabling the golden nightmare and letting it fall to the ground in a heap. Jean fell to her knees in her gracious cockpit, tears continuing to flow down her eyes as she felt her heart break. The man she loved and admired her just tried to kill her. She knew at that point, the man she once thought the world over was gone, with only a monster wearing his skin. But that did not make it hurt any less. Shin, however, despite his nightmare being disabled, was still very much alive in his cockpit. No, not like this. He tried to force his unit open, trying to punch and kick his way out like a madman in an asylum. No, the world will burn. I'll see that it does burn. I'll kill you all. Lord Hyuga, we've entered the command center, but it's empty. That broke Shin from his maddened thoughts. Empty. It was true, the Britannian strike team had entered the command center of Castle Weisswolf, only to find there wasn't a single soul inside. There's no one here, my lord. One of the soldiers reported. Breisgau is gone, as is everyone else. We'll sweep the rest of the castle. However, unbeknownst to them, a small camera laid hidden in the far corner near the ceiling, observing everything. Layla watched from the screen, standing alongside Nunnally, on the bridge of the Ark, as the Euro-Britannian soldiers had entered the empty command center back at Castle Weisswolf. They knew that even if they swept the castle, the enemy wouldn't find a single soul as every person and valued piece of technology and had been moved from the castle to the Ark on Horai Island the night before. Nina had successfully hacked the anti-ground bridge satellite and, with Ratchet's help, implanted a special code to disable the satellite as well as create a false beacon so that the enemy forces could see it was still online, when it really wasn't. Layla and Nunnally stood close together, Eliza purring against Layla's leg, as Ratchet walked close to them. Millie, Rivals, Nina, Misty, Claus, Anna, Sophie, Oscar, and all the other military officers, scientists, and people had stood on different areas of the Ark's bridge, all of them observing everything as the Autobot scientist opened the comm channel. Ratchet to all combat teams, prepare for immediate ground bridge extraction. All across Castle Weisswolf, multiple ground bridge portals had opened to allow all the Autobot and Black Knight units, with the WZERO soldiers, to escape. On the east side, Elita 1 kept covering fire to allow Strongarm and Ayanos Alexander to enter the ground bridge portal before she leapt in herself, with the portal closing behind as the remaining Viacon and Euro-Britannian soldiers looked in shock. Similarly, Skybite looked only in confusion as he saw Jetfire, RC, and Collins Gurren escape through a ground bridge portal near their location. At the south, Ultra Magnus and Suzaku's Lancelot 2 had provided covering fire as they made sure Sideswipe and Smokescreen, as well as Rio and Gino in their respective nightmares, to enter the ground bridge portal at their location. On the west end, Bulkhead and Ray's Raiden provided similar cover as Orpheus Byakuan, Yuki's Alexander, Monica's Florence, and Grindcore entered their ground bridge portal before the two partners entered it themselves. It closed behind as the recovering Underbite could only look in confused stupor. Another ground bridge portal had also opened, much to the shock of Steeljaw and Jean, but the latter was even further surprised as the Shinkiro picked up her nightmare with her still inside. "Let's go. Everyone out. Now," Zero ordered. Not needing to be told twice, Bumblebee had transformed with Prowl as they, Chera's Pink Akatsuki, and Akito's Alexander made their way to the ground bridge. Shirley lowered her nightmare to allow Alice and Maribel to climb on before she too joined them, entering the portal. Once he saw everyone made it, Lelouch flew his Shinkiro, still holding onto the Grachus with Jean inside, and entered the portal before it closed. "A ground bridge," Steeljaw exclaimed as Shin had used his sword to cut himself free from the Vercingetorix's cockpit. "Impossible. The satellite should have." His optics widened in realization. "It's a trap." Layla held the trigger in her hands. She seemed hesitant at first, looking toward the screen in front of her as she saw the castle that had been her home since she was little. She knew what had to be done, but a part of her couldn't help but hesitate. That is until Nunnally placed her hand on top of hers. Layla looked towards the younger girl as she gave a smile and a look of understanding. That was all Layla needed as she smiled back, held the trigger firmly before steeling her resolve. "Till all are one." Layla then pressed the button. Multiple explosions erupted from all over Castle Weisswolf and its grounds. The bombs underneath the command center exploded first before the whole structure collapsed, as well as those within the underground facility connected to Apollo's chariot launch site, causing it all to crumble and fall apart. More and more explosions erupted from not only within Castle Weisswolf, destroying all the rooms, offices, and everything else within before the grounds around the castle also erupted. The surviving Decepticons, consisting of Fracture, Underbite, Thunderhoof, and Skybite attempted to escape, while most of the remaining Viacons and Britannian Nightmares and soldiers were caught up in the explosions. The castle's structure began to collapse as Steeljaw quickly grabbed the maddened Shin and transformed before attempting to drive off. But even with the Decepticon gunning it, the rubble of the castle would soon catch up with them before they would get caught up and buried alive, all the while Steeljaw gave a defiant howl. That was it. Castle Weisswolf was now gone, nothing short of a massive pile of rubble and debris as the snow began to set in. However, while first glance may seem like a defeat, it was in truth, a great victory. Layla was almost brought to tears as she saw her home go up in all the explosions from the Ark's main screen. Though she knew it was part of the plan and the best way to assure the enemy could not salvage any of their data that they had already copied and downloaded into the Ark and Horai Island systems. But it was still heartbreaking, all the same. Nunnally wasted no time in pulling Layla into a comforting hug, which she returned. "Don't worry," Ratchet said as he tried to provide some comfort himself. "We have everything of value from your base, and all our forces have evacuated to Horai Island with no casualties. We've won." I know, Layla muttered as she wiped the tears from her eyes and tried to stand straight. "It's just. Trust me, Layla. I understand," Ratchet said sincerely. It was one of the hardest things he and Optimus ever did, organizing the exodus from Cybertron when they knew it couldn't be saved, as well as other similar decisions during the war. "Really? I do. Thank you." Layla nodded as Nunnally held her hand as a sign of her comfort and friendship. "Welcome to the Black Knights, Layla." Nunnally smiled, which Layla returned with a smile faux her own. Ratchet gave a nod before accessing the comms again. "Ark to Granbury, the operation at Castle Weisswolf was a success. What is the status on your end?" Euphemia couldn't help but smile as she stood on the bridge of the Glindonites' personal airship alongside Grand Duke Valanes and Toto Thompson at the controls. "Everything is going smoothly here," Euphy reported back. "We have the last of the Decepticon forces cornered in a Euro-Britannian stronghold, and our coalition is ready to move in." "Acknowledged," Ratchet said before signing off. "Well, Euphemia, everyone is waiting for your word." Valanes encouraged. Just below the Granbury was a large army consisting of a Euro-Britannian mobile base, being operated by Andrea Farnese, with the remainder of the Holy Order of Raphael in their various nightmares all around him, as well as those of the Asura strike force and other Euro-Britannian infantry. There was also a massive tank-like vehicle of equal size with the Geass Smilas at the command, being covered by many more Guardmare nightmares. And behind them were several hundred European tanks. Hovering alongside the Grandberry were multiple European and Euro-Britannian military aircraft and even a few flying nightmares. The only reaming structure under Decepticon control laid in front of them, which was heavily fortified as the various Decepticon soldiers laid bunkered down and ready for a fight. A few years ago, Euphemia would never see herself leading an assault like this. She was a pacifist back then. However, times have changed. She knew the Decepticons would not listen to reason and back down. For the sake of her family, her friends, her loved ones, and for the whole world, she would fight. All units, commence attack, Euphemia ordered. The Grandberry then opened as Uldren piloted the Lancelot Grail out with the Glinda Knights right behind her. Just as the Glinda Knights advanced, Ashley led the Asura strike force forward as well. "Hey Uldren." Ashley contacted her as the tanks, aircraft, and other military vehicles opened fire on the enemy stronghold, prompting the Decepticons to return fire with their own defenses. "Bet I can take out more cons than you." Uldren couldn't help but smirk at his challenge. "You're on." And this at the end of Season 2 Part 7 of this What If. Hope you guys like it. Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.